So welcome back. This is week 5 of Summer Watch, and tonight's focus could be morning time for you, is the Tlacolula pink tomato. If you're using the whole seed catalog, it's on page 462. And then the Japanese print is on a few pages beyond that. And what struck me about this is that I've been adding Japanese aesthetic principles to these different processes because I've talked about them throughout all my teaching classes, but I never really named them by Japanese aesthetic. So tonight's focus, besides the tomato, is we're going to talk a little bit about what they call wabi sabi. And wabi sabi is really about imperfection. And this painting, sometimes in what I call sumi painting, which is traditional Japanese and Chinese painting with the brush, it's all about the movement, the air. It's not so much about the details, even though I like to teach detail work. So I thought we could be a little bit freer in this process. And if you look at the print, and what's so ironic is the man that's featured in the catalog actually brought tomatoes to Japan. Now, of course, they're easily available for people to eat, and they eat a lot. And there's even a recipe in the catalog. But this print was done by an artist who's very well known, Kano Tanyu. He lived between 1602 and 1674. And this is one of the first images ever painted in Japan on tomatoes. And you can see the resemblance between these type of tomatoes, but tomatoes do have the curves around them, and you can see the different, are they ripe, are they less ripe, and then the leaves. But I thought it's a great piece. We will visit watercolors. If you have a sumi brush, you're welcome to use it. I thought it would be great just to do it in watercolor. You can also use a ink pen or a micron because it is somewhat outlined. In traditional sumi painting, I wouldn't even suggest a watercolor brush. I would say only special sumi brushes because part of that is about the way we breathe and we paint with those brushes. So I want you to think about embracing imperfection. We're not going to fix our paintings. We're going to leave the mistakes. If we get drippings or splatters, we're going to let it go. Maybe we're going to have textures that bother us or would have bothered us in maybe a different piece of work. And sometimes when we're outlining, sometimes your hand slips. So sometimes it's a little off or wonky. We're not going to worry about it and we're going to let it go. Think about it as showing character and has its own kind of grace, right? So I hope you enjoy this process. And so I have my paints over here, and I'm going to move them over so that maybe you can see them a little bit better. And I'm going to activate my paints. So I have my 6 tubes in here, 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues. And then I do have Payne's Gray, which is a great blue, gray, and burnt sienna. There are a couple other colors, but those are my basic 6 tubes of paint that pretty much I can get almost any color I wanted, except we did struggle a little bit with the apricot uh, cosmos we did a few weeks ago, and those were a little bit more challenging colors. So what do I do when I begin looking at this piece? Well, it has a blue a blue background. And then I observe where are what I call highlights. So there's a few highlights on top of these tomatoes. And in watercolors, we start from, let's say, the lightest colors to the darkest colors. Unlike if you're using oils or acrylics, you start from darks and go to lights. Sometimes we hold the white of the paper. On this, we're going to just lift it or paint around it. But the reason I picked this tomato is it kind of reminded me of the bulging in the print and that there were vines to use to paint. So let's go with maybe putting some uh, vines in. And the other thing we want to pay attention to is the space around the tomatoes. I do not think I'm going to paint all these tomatoes. I think I'm going to focus more on the left side. Feel free to pick and choose whatever you want and design it the way you want. Maybe you want to eliminate some tomatoes as well. So, what I'm going to do, so in traditional sumi painting, there is no uh, really drawing. If you draw, you're drawing very pale lines um, with ink or with the color that you're painting if you need to kind of set up the page. So let me just clip this on the corner to hold the page down better. Okay, so we're going to mix it. So the question you ask if you're starting with the veins is what kind of green? Is it a bright green, an olive green, a blue green, or a warmer green with more yellow? And it kind of seems in between. So I am going to start with a warm yellow, so it looks more golden. And I always have some paper towel. I'm just going to wipe that off. And then I'm going to use my warm blue, which means that it has more red in it than blue. And this is an ultramarine blue. So it's more olive green, but I'm going to go a little bit darker. And then I also see there is some brighter green in it. So I'm going to make a cooler, a little bit cooler green. And let's see. And if we don't use it, it's okay. So I activate the color in my palette and then bring it to my mixing board and make sure it's a little fluid, not so thin that it's so runny. So I just took a little bit of phthalo blue, which is my cool knife, a little bit greener. So you have to decide what you see and what you're mixing up. So sometimes um, I can just kind of go over the area that I kind of want for placement. So think about your placement. You want it maybe off-centered. So I'm going to bring the vine a little bit more over. Okay. So if it's measured, maybe about here. And in this particular, if I was painting on like a rice paper, um, we don't pre-wet the paper because it's so thin. So this is interesting. It looks like it's almost a leg standing. Oops. Okay. And I'm trying out a different brush, which I'll share with you. So I'm going to leave the space. I think that's a little bit brighter green. So then this really comes down more. I didn't curve it. It has a really great curve. So let's just take, even though we talked about perfection, I'm going to lift it up. Okay, a little bit better. So in traditional Japanese painting, there's you would just let it be. That's what your energy or chi expressed. There we go. So I just really like that curve. And now I can go back in and put in, and it does have a little bit slight curve. You can see the energy of it. So that kind of gives me a nice starting point for the tomatoes. And so when we're painting the tomatoes, I always say, what's the lightest color that you see? So obviously yellows, there's some light greens in there, and then we get into orange and orange reds, especially on this one. This one may have some cooler reds, but um, maybe in certain areas. So basically, I would start with a pale. So you have to decide, do I see a warm yellow or a cool? So I'm going to go with a cool. And let's see if we can just make some strokes. I want to just think in my head about how big am I going to make this tomato. And I'm going to scoot over in my chair with so I don't have to move. So I'm just kind of pressing down. I kind of like this brush. It was a brush. They're Yatsutomo brushes, fusion brushes, and I think there were 5 or 4 of them. And I'm just testing them out um, because I really like the Velvet Touch brushes for some of her other paintings. But this kind of has a feel like a sumi brush, but when I hold a sumi brush, I hold it very different than when I'm painting a Western style, I guess I would say. So notice that I left some white in between too. Okay, so then I see some green. I think it's kind of the cooler green, but maybe a little bit more yellow. So I'm going to add that lemony yellow, which mine is azo. Oh, there. That's a little bit more yellow. And if your brush tip is too wet, just blot it on your paper towel. And I've also been wearing some sock sleeves, and I'm in the process of kind of reorganizing the office. So things you wouldn't believe. Things are kind of all over the place right now. And so, because this is kind of wet on wet, the green should just kind of bleed into it. And if it's too wet, feel free to use a little hair blower. So I have my little heated craft tool, nice Amazon product. Oops. So what's cool about that one stem I didn't like is it may be looking a little bit like there's a shadow under there. So sometimes imperfection works to our advantage. Okay, and then I see some orange. So I'm gonna take my warm yellow, which is more golden, and I'm going to mix it with my warmer red to make stronger orange. There we go. So this part of the process is observing. Where do I see it? About where do I place it? Then it seems like it gets much darker under the other tomato because it's kind of like a shadow a little bit. I'm gonna drop in, I think, some warm yellow. Not too much, so then it helped and maybe blot it. Remember, Wabi Sabi, enjoy the imperfection. Okay. And then there seems to be some really dark green, and I still see some vines, but I think I'll put that in after. So while that's kind of drying, I still think it needs a little bit more red to drop in. So that's my warm red, and it's a little wet. So I'm going to kind of feather it, like my stroke is light and feathery. And this looks almost like dry brush, so you'd almost have to pull the paint off. And okay. And then it gets dark, but we'll go back to that a little bit. So it's just cute, it's sweet. Um, and now I'm going to work on this. If you choose to pick a different tomato, a different style, that's perfectly fine. There's lots of different tomatoes. So let's see. So this one is clearly sideways. So I'm just kind of getting in my curves. Sometimes I like to measure, there's actual tools that you can use to measure how wide something is. It just it's like a base, a glaze. But if you see, you can really see the underside of this tomato. So I have to really show kind of its point of center and build from there. So the next color we see is a little bit of that greenish color. Oops. I think there's a little bit more yellow in there. So I just blot my brush because it's so full of water and pick it up. So it kind of curves at the top. And then we kind of get this bump. That's the word I'm looking for, bumps. There's definitely some greens in there up at the top. So careful, I don't have a whole lot of paint on this brush because I can layer it and go deeper if I need to. And you're probably starting to see some of the other colors that are in the tomatoes. Subtle, but they're there. So it's almost like a cool red, red violet. Let's put some cool red in, and that will maybe ground it a little bit. That's a lot. Let's see. There's definitely some blue that needs to. So I'm just going to blend it in. Go. And maybe lift this. So see, like this paper dries faster. If you're working on watercolor paper, you probably can manipulate it a little better. If I was out in the field, I'd be painting a lot faster. Okay, so I'm going to take that cool red, which is Queen Rose, and I'm going to make kind of some red violet. Oop, too much. There. And if you have a finer brush, yeah, get a finer brush. So this one is came with that set, and then this is a red velvet number 4, which really has a pretty good tip on it. So you can use whatever you have. I even have another one that's a little bit thinner. this one. Okay. So I'm just looking, there's some like dark, these are more green veining, so we could put that in now because it's kind of dry. So I'm just kind of looking at, and then I just like to dot it with my finger. I'm gonna put a drop of phthalo. So if you have something that's cerulean's more most of the time, a lot of times there's like more white in it, but manganese or it's one of the Windsors. I don't know if it's blue shade or red shade, but they're all kind of in the same family. Yeah. Just like a little bit more of that pop of color. It's just and some that was too deep, but kind of pops it. There. Okay. Now go back to the red violet. And my paper is not uh wet anymore. So when you you want to just blend it with some water pretty fast, or you'll get right the hard edge. Or you could re-wet it and then glaze it. This reminds me a little of the zucchini, which had a lot of detail. Um, but in order to get those bumps, I had to really play with the lighting. Okay. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit and kind of play with the, go back to the vines. This is when a magnifying glass would be good. It's hard for me to see. Make it look busy. And it kind of has that deep edge, but let's see. This is much darker. So let's look at this. So it's got leaves. There's really no leaves in this, but maybe on one of them, maybe on here, we might want to just kind of imply a leaf. And now for, what did it fall? Can't think of the name. No, the head of it. But maybe we could get another one. So you have to decide. I kind of like the one that's tucked under a little bit. But it's going to come close. So if I want to keep a little bit of a border, I might have to. But I like kind of that pumpkin-y color. So I'm going to mix up some more. So it's kind of tucked in between that space. I feel like I'm painting a pumpkin. To make it a little bit deeper. That's too deep. Yeah, it's better. It's like there's some green up on top here. And what do we see in that dark? Maybe it's some of that dark red violet. And watch how it's curving. That's wet. Gotta wait for it to dry. Well, sometimes it's better to wait because then the paint will start running, as you all know. And just take your brush. This one's not a softer brush with just some water. And if it's too wet, blot it a little bit. Control sometimes is good. Okay, there we go. So whenever I'm painting these, I have to say, you know, when we start getting into peppers, tomatoes, sometimes apples, can you see the difference between what you're painting? Um, I think these are unusual um, tomatoes, but when you paint sometimes the common things, that's the question. You want to make sure the viewer, person who's looking, may just be you. Nobody else is going to see it. But would somebody know that's what you know you or do you want them to figure it out themselves? What do they think it is? So, okay, so this guy needs some veins or stem something, right? And I think I want to put these are my bonding, I can't think. Okay, so I filled in this leaf a little bit with some uh, cooler green. I'm just gonna add maybe some texture to it. And then I want to add the tomato. It's really the connection of the tomato to this. So where do I want to put it um, as part of maybe the composition piece? So let's see. So I'm gonna kind of draw out a little bit the branching. And maybe you can have fun with the brush strokes a little bit. So I think they have five um, connection. Now I have to look that up. So I botanically know what I'm talking about. And if I was nature journaling, it probably would describe and put down what I notice about this. Because even though I eat tomatoes and know what tomatoes are, I really don't really always understand the structure of them and pay attention. So, um, I'm journaling in it, but it gives me an opportunity to explore this plant a little bit. And then I think tucking this shadow in is kind of interesting. Um, I think it's just they look a little browner than green, but maybe I have to go back in there a little bit. Um, Definitely got to make this a little bit darker. And if anybody wants to post what they're doing, feel free. You can add it to my Facebook page, Elaine M. Bergstrom. Um, and you know, sometimes I used to always post students' work, but you're feel free, um, where the comments are to do that if you feel comfortable. That just darkened and I hope it doesn't look too dark. Okay. So sometimes there's broken lines. We let it's saying we let the viewer kind of close. And in sumi painting style, we don't always draw all of the lines. And you can go on the outside as well. Some styles kind of pops it a little bit. So you have to decide, do you want to outline this. I kind of like it. I'm happy with what's happening. And there's kind of like a vine here. Maybe this could be some shadow. I like the background on this photograph. It's kind of textured. There's also, dark shadow under it, but I kind of like it uh this way. Kind of fun and easy tomato piece. Now as far as composition goes, let's see. Um, I've done a lot of circular compositions. So I'm gonna overlay. It's just a lid, and then I want to leave a little bit of edge. And some of the pieces will kind of go off the page. And I'm going to put a title. Now, if you're doing an art piece, you don't have to, but I'm doing kind of some nature journaling with it. So let me leave this here so you can still paint. And then I'm going to write stuff. So I might use a micron or a pen for this part of it. So I have a couple microns. So I'm going to do a micron pen. And let's see, with the and this is where like calligraphy can really come in. If you really like to do I just try my best to write neat. Sometimes I'll put a little something like tag on it. So then I would look in the catalog, or I would look up the tomato. And since I'm not necessarily drawing exactly from life, but I could say what I notice and wonder about these tomatoes. So I'm going to look at, let's see, it's 462. So I guess they bloom within, I mean, they can be edible in 80 days. A unique tomato collected by a friend in Mexico. These pear shaped. So that I think is important because so I would say pear shape, and I'll show you how I do it um, in a second. Pear shape. Maybe I can move this. Hopefully you guys have seen it painting. So I'm starting to add some things to a nature journal piece of it. Pear-shaped fruit, right? Because tomatoes are fruit, not vegetables. A lot of times they're so sweet when we um, grow them. Deep ribs, that's important, right? And it says ruffles. but I don't know if I painted ruffles. And the other thing would be I could go back and put white paint on it if I wanted to highlight or lift. So we could do that in a second. Um, Mild, sweet, pink, pink flash. Like I guess most tomatoes that I eat are reddish, more reddish in there. With gold splotched shoulders. Gold splotch. I don't know if I see that. That's interesting. Now I could also go back with the pen and I could outline it. That Sumi style with black ink. Let's see. So I'm not drawing the line over anything. So like when I came up to the leaf, I stopped so you can see it, and then I'll erase. Uh, just give it a second because the micron pens dry pretty fast. Now you might want to work with a diamond or like the beans. We divided the page into, asymmetrical. So let me just share that. So got this. If I go backwards, you can see the beans. We talked about asymmetrical, oops, and then yellow paint. Yellow is very fugitive too. Um, and on this one we did uh one, two, three, four, five. Odd numbers are very aesthetic. Asymmetrical pieces are aesthetic, but I do like uh, the circle. I think that's nice and contained. And for me, I would put my chopper seal that I put on for every page. So down here, for the nature journaling piece, I'd probably say I wonder if I had any questions about how it was growing. And sometimes I actually put an edge line like I did with the beans. I like to finish the page with a margin uh, around it. I didn't do that with the Louisa flowers we did. Um, and for the cosmos that we did that was our second week. I made it into a Japanese fan because I do that with some of my artwork. So I hope this was helpful and you enjoyed being inspired by the Japanese aesthetic of wabi sabi. And sometimes it's okay just to paint and have fun, and it doesn't have to be perfect. See you next time.